Well, good morning, and our guest this morning on Our Stories is Jan Devore. Jan we've been talking together, and she's going to share the story through her life over quite a period of time, and it involves some major incidents in her life, one that was kind of thrust upon her, and another one that she made the decision herself, but I think you'll find it quite interesting. Jan, you said that your father was a Methodist minister, and you did a fair amount of moving around because of that.
Right.
What cities did you live in? And you said you finally kind of settled into Waukegan. What grade was it when you moved there?
Okay. Well, I was born in Hinsdale, Illinois. My dad was the pastor at the First Methodist Church in Westmont, Illinois. So we lived in Westmont for the first 5 years of my life, and then for about the next 5 in Rockford, Illinois. Then a couple years in Barrington, Illinois, and we moved to Waukegan, and it was in October of my 7th grade year.
Okay.
So the school had started, and we came in. I don't remember why we came in after school started, but that must be when the move was. So.
Okay. So you're in Waukegan, and we've moved you now up to freshman in high school. And you were elected to a leadership position on the student council. I guess, one of the things I was wondering about is, since I wasn't there to watch what went on, what did the other students see in you in terms of leadership and so forth that you think led them to vote you into that position?
Well, I don't know. I think I always had participated in a lot of activities in grade school and so forth, and kind of assumed some leadership positions. And I ran for one of 5 class positions my freshman year. So I was serving on the student council. Yeah. That was at the beginning. And then at the end of my freshman year, I ran for the vice president position of the whole student council. Waukegan High School was set up in 2 campuses. Freshmen and sophomore were in the west campus, and juniors and seniors in the east campus. And each school had about 2,000 students. So it was a school of about 4,000. And we met jointly once a week, the 2 campuses, student councils, for the full student council. So anyway, I ran for the position of vice president of student council. Which that person ran the freshman-sophomore campus. And then the president of the student council, of course, ran the student council, but then was in charge of the junior-senior position. So I was elected the vice president at the end of my freshman year. And I had to campaign for that, and I had to go to the East Campus to have a whole school assembly, where I gave my campaign speech. My brother was a senior that year and was fairly well known and pretty active, and
well,
so
that didn't hurt.
No, so I think I got some votes there from him and his friends, and so I think that put me over the top and winning that campaign. So I'd been elected the vice president of the student council at the end of my freshman year.
All right, so you're about ready to take office as the vice president of the lower campus. And an unfortunate incident put you in a peculiar spot.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Well, the young man who was elected as the president of the student council was an outstanding student, just, straight A student, due to be the valedictorian of the class and all of that. He was in a swimming accident in the summer right before we started and died. And of course, it was just shocking to everybody. And so here they were, before school started, we started meeting the advisors and some key people on the student council to figure out what we were going to do, because our bylaws didn't account for a president not finishing the term.
Yeah.
They just had never anticipated that. And then what do you do that you've got this person who's the vice president, which normally would, succeed to be the president, is a little pipsqueak sophomore. And what do we do in this case? So there was some deliberation over a few weeks or a few days. I don't remember how long it was, but they finally decided that they would have me succeed to the presidency. So here I became the president of a 4,000 student body as a sophomore in high school. And
so now you had to exert some leadership over a number of students who were older than you.
Right.
And had more experience in the school.
Right. And my executive team were the seniors.
Yeah.
You know, the secretary, the treasurer, and they selected an outstanding guy to take over the senior campus to do the things at the senior campus that were but I had two great advisors. I had an advisor for the freshman sophomore campus to the student council who was just new to that position, and then a woman who had been the student council advisor for many years who was at the senior campus. They provide a lot of support for me, and the students that I worked with for the year, I think they said, yeah,
Sure.
you can do it.
What, well, you've kind of answered a little bit of this already, but in terms of particularly getting older students to accept your leadership as a sophomore, any particular things? You've mentioned a couple of adults who kind of
Right.
obviously gave you some help and support.
Well, I think just being prepared, knowing what needed to be done and working hard to do that. And I kind of knew, I'd been on the student council for a year, so I kind of knew that. But just, building relationships with people and
being
getting
honest
through it.
enough to admit what you didn't know.
Right, exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you had to in that position.
Right.
So what do you think you learned about yourself through all
Well, obviously, it built some confidence that I was able to somehow pull this thing off that year. I had a lot of opportunities to be a public speaker, of speaking in front of groups and that kind of thing, and so I think I gained in some of that experience. But just, being organized and trying to do my
Sure.
best
Yeah.
and being all in on it and working hard at it.
So you progressed through high school and then graduated from college, and you went to
Illinois Wesleyan.
Illinois Wesleyan. Okay.
Yeah.
And initially, you kind of spent a couple of years in more non-leadership type positions, but what do you remember about sort of feeling like, okay, now it's time to sort of...
Well, I had some leadership positions in college. I
Yeah.
was the president of my sorority, and I was the president of a freshman sophomore honorary, and I ended up working for the dean of students office for 2 summers before my junior year and before my senior year, and helped them in running the student orientation program for the students and
Yeah.
student and parent orientation. And there were some other activities of being a resident director for some high school kids that came to do a special program at the university and so forth. So I think, in all of that, I then went on, and I had been a math major and a chemistry minor in school, and I'd done education. I'd done my student teaching at Normal Community High School in math, and I ended up taking a teaching position at a middle school in Waukesha, Wisconsin. One of my good friends from school had also gotten a position there. So during those years, it was kind of like, you were being a
Sure,
teacher
sure.
and doing all of that kind of
Plenty
thing.
to do.
Plenty to do. But at the end of 3 years, my friend who I had gone to live with, and then she got married. But anyway, she and her husband were leaving that year, and I decided, well, my interest was in student affairs work. I knew that from working for the dean's office
Right.
in the summers.
Yeah.
So it was time to
look for something.
so I decided to go to grad school
Yeah.
in college student personnel administration and guidance and counseling types of things. And so I ended up at Indiana University to do my graduate work. And, so that I was making a switch of careers away
Right.
from the math and science to doing what I really had a passion for,
Sure.
which was student activities and working with students and that kind of thing. And after finishing there, I ended up taking a position at Millikan in 1978.
Right.
And I had interviewed across the country, but interestingly enough, Joe Houston was the chief student affairs officer at that time, and he and the dean at Illinois Wesleyan were 2 young deans of students who became good friends, and I kind of got to know Joe on a couple of occasions. I don't know that that's why I took the job, but it just was a familiarity, and Millikan offered me an opportunity for what I would call a generalist position, where I could do work in residence life, but still do other things in student activities and Greek life and a variety of things. And so I thought, this is a place where I can, in a small school that I love, the small school atmosphere where I can progress. And so.
Well, and that kind of a job was going to give you a chance to really dip your fingers into a number of different aspects of university life.
Right, you're dealing with academic support, you're dealing with discipline, you're dealing with student activities, student life, a bulk of the student's life on campus, so,
Right.
yeah.
And then you decided to kind of take a different step and different direction and something a little unpredicted. So
Right.
tell us about that.
Well, I had been in the student affairs area for probably about 17, 18 years at that time, and Joe Houston was my boss. I was kind of his second in command, and he left Milliken. And I was promoted to become the chief student affairs administrator. I had the title of dean already, but I was the chief student affairs administrator. And within about a year or two of doing that, I realized I was really missing being with the students because I was doing a lot of administrative tasks.
Yeah.
And in a lot of meetings with people who I wasn't really wanting to be with. I would just as soon be with the students. And a new administration had come in, and they had some ideas about changes that they were going to do in student housing and that kind of thing. And I wasn't particularly thinking that was a good idea of what they were planning to do. So the question was, do I hang in there and work through it, or do I do something else? Or do I leave and go someplace else? And at that time, Peg Louie, who was a member here, a lot of people knew Peg and Don Louie, who were at First Press for a long time. She had become the vice president for alumni and development at Milliken, and we were on the cabinet together. And one day she said to me, my alumni director's leaving. You know everybody in the last 15 to 20 years at Milliken. Help me come up with somebody who would be a really great alumni director. And I thought for a moment, and I said, how about me? And she goes, what are you talking about? And I said, well, this may be a chance for me to keep connected with all of these people that I've known for so long, to parlay my relationships, to keep students, alums connected to the institution. We were going to start a major capital campaign, and that maybe I could get them to talk them into support the institution. So I made the decision to basically step down a couple levels and leave the president's cabinet to go and do alumni work.
So, but despite that being lower pay and maybe from other people's perspectives, perhaps not as much prestige as what you had previously, you felt like you really made the right move.
Well, it was a tough transition, let me say that, because I was used to being kind of on the cabinet, and as the chief student affairs person, you knew everything that was going on campus. And I had stepped away from that, and that was very hard for me to not be a part of the goings-on of what was going on. And then, I wasn't dealing with students anymore. I was dealing with the alumni population, so I was missing knowing the students. So I went through quite a period of like, did I make the right decision? And I had, before when I had finished my PhD in higher ed administration with the idea that I would want to be the dean of students, chief student affairs person at a small school sometime. And here I had attained that level. My parents, when I counseled with them about what I was going to do, they were like, why would you do this? Because you're at the level where you want to be. And I just said, but I'm not with the people I want to be with.
Right.
And I had built my whole career on building relationships. And so it was like, what's more important in my life to do at that point? And so I decided to do it and see what would happen.
Sure. So you're in a different position now, but it's one that is offering you some fulfillment in ways that your other position didn't. Okay, but you still weren't having a student thing, but you found a way to make that happen.
Right. Well, I had for quite a few years before I had made the move been the public address announcer for women's basketball at Millikan. And so I continued in that role, and that gave me a great group of students to get to know, and I even got to travel with them some. They would make some holiday trips, and so I got to go to California and to Colorado with them, and I'd do an alumni event while they were in town, you know, to
Sure.
have people come to the games and that kind of thing. So that happened. And then Brad Holmes had come to Millikan as the head of the choral department, and Millikan had always traveled on tour in the school year, and he had come to the alumni area before I had moved in and said, you know, how can we do things together to increase interest in the tour and get audiences and so forth, and they really hadn't made any steps. Well, when I came in, and I had been kind of, to tell you the truth, a U choir groupie for many years, he and I talked about how we could do that, and he said, well, why don't you come along on the tour with us? And so I rode the bus with the university choir, and in January we would do a domestic tour, usually in Illinois and the contiguous states, as kind of a recruiting effort, but then maybe about every third time we would go someplace else farther out in the country. We'd go to the Southwest or the Southeast, and we ended up going to New York and to Washington, D.C., and they sang at the National Cathedral, and they were invited at one point to sing with Brad, who was doing a festival at Carnegie Hall. We did Carnegie Hall. So I got to be with this outstanding group of students, and they did, when they were doing the domestic tour, they would do homestays, and so I did homestays as well, but I stayed with with alums that I knew.
Sure.
And so it was an opportunity for me to continue those relationships with people that I got to know. And then, of course, about every third year, they traveled internationally. And so that gave me an opportunity to do things. I mean, I went on their first international trip to England, and we had a young alumni choir go along, and we had alumni friends and parents go along. We had like 125 people on this tour with us. Well, then that's the only time we did that alumni choir, but you know, I ended up going to the Dominican Republic with them, to China, to we went to Scotland, Ireland, and England again. I did the Baltic states of Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia with them. I did Spain and Portugal. So it gave me an opportunity to do this travel that I would have never expected to do, both in the country and outside. And I guess the other thing that was really needed when I moved into the alumni position is I had alumni clubs in various regional areas, and one, of course, was the Chicago area. When I was the dean of students, you know, I didn't make it home very often because I was so active being a part of the campus life that, you know, I was there for major holidays with my family, but I ended up spending much more time with my parents, who were becoming elderly at that point, and I would stay with them when I was in the Chicago area. And so, you know, there were some hidden opportunities there that I wouldn't have expected.
Sounds like you wound up really having some life experiences that would not have necessarily come your way.
And especially the international travel. Besides traveling with the choir, I also took alumni groups on trips. I took an alumni group on a cruise through the Panama Canal. We went to Hawaii at one point. We did Rome and Tuscany, alumni and friends trip. I ended up doing Spain and Portugal with that group. So, I mean, I got all of these great cultural experiences and these opportunities to travel that had I stayed at the Dean of Students office and stayed on campus, I would have never had these opportunities, especially as a single person of traveling, and you're in these, you know, things where the tours are set up for you, so you're a part of the group. And, you know, that just was really fulfilling to have that opportunity. So about the last half of my career, I did alumni and development work, and ended up retiring in 2013. But even when I retired, I still did the things. I still was announcing women's basketball, and I still was traveling with the choir on tour because my successor was like, what's this bus trip thing about? And I said, well, you go on the bus. It goes, do you want to keep doing that? And I go, sure, if you don't want to, I'd be glad to do it. So, it was a chance to be there and to not only see this great choir sing in various locations, but to be kind of the welcoming committee and planning events around there, being there. So it was really a great thing.
So, well, I'm really glad you shared your story. It was really interesting, and and really envy all the experiences that you had. It was great.
Well, it really was it ended up being a great career here.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.